Welcome, everybody, to another episode of A Conversation With here on Keyboard Kimura. I'm E. Spencer Kite, joined today by, I was going to say Hall of Fame veteran MMA reporter, but we don't have we don't have that wing yet. This ain't like major professional sports, but it should be one day. And when it does get there, you will be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He is John Morgan of the Underground, of the UG. Thanks for doing this, man. I appreciate you coming through.
Hey, man, you give me an intro like that, calling me a Hall of Famer, I'll join anytime you want. But no, man, I appreciate it, man. I always appreciate your commitment to the sport and your commitment to telling the stories of the people in it. So when you invited me, absolutely honored to take some time, brother.
I mean, listen, I think anybody that follows the sport understands it and would describe you as a Hall of Famer as well. And a first ballot one at that. The man with the first question, the man with the blue shirt, which we will get to later on in this. But we start as we always do. John Morgan, when did you fall in love with combat sports?
Man, it's funny. So as a little kid, I grew up watching professional wrestling, right? WWE,
Of course.
Saturday night's main event, that sort of stuff. And then I was around like 8 or 9 years old when I figured out that it was scripted. And I will never say fake, especially since after the last time I got to go see a pro wrestling show, to go see CM Punk, and I got to see AEW up close, I realized how many bumps those guys are taking, how physical. So I will not say fake.
I was going to say, you call fights alongside a professional wrestler, and if you called it fake, he will most likely Dr. D. David Schultz you once or twice and be like, does this feel fake?
Exactly. So I will not say that, but I will say scripted. So once I figured that out, I kind of shied away from it for a little bit. And then it's a wild story, man. Just I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and through a friend of my mom's, we were at a gym opening in Dallas, and it was Guy Mezger who was opening a gym in Dallas, and it was just a kickboxing gym. This is pre-MMA days. But I went into this gym opening and walked in there. And first of all, Guy Mezger, I mean, what a cool dude, right? You're a kid seeing that dude, all muscled up and got the ponytail, and he's, there's highlight stuff of him on the walls. I'm like, that's a cool dude right there, kickboxer. But then he had this tape playing on loop on VHS of Muay Thai from Thailand. And I saw this Muay Thai happening. I'm like, oh, that's what a real fight looks like. Like, right. Yes, this is awesome. And so that was awesome to me. And then started, as I got home, started, trying to read more about Guy and the journey that he was on. And then that's right around, I was about 15 years old when the UFC started, and Pancrase and kind of was an early adopter of renting those from VHS tapes from Blockbuster and that sort of thing. And it all just snowballed from there.
So I know in doing my prep for this that the original little kid dream, like lots of us, was I want to be a professional athlete.
That's right.
And then like lots of us, it was, I'm never going to be a professional athlete. So let's just pivot this into something else that I can be around professional sports. When did you decide, how did you decide that covering sports, being a sports writer, was the thing you wanted to do? And who were the people that sort of shaped that for you in the early days of things?
Yeah, it's interesting. And you're spot on about that. I grew up playing baseball, basketball, soccer, and I enjoyed it all. Watched a lot of football, obviously growing up in Texas, and love sports, but did realize early on that's not going to happen. But around high school, we had a high school newspaper, and that was the first time I was like, oh, wait a minute, like I can be a part of the high school, journalism team here, and I can, help tell the story of these athletes and be around it and cover the team and, to talk to people about their wins and losses, their journey, what's going on. And that's when I realized, hey, I think this is what I want to do. And really, honestly, yeah, it was my high school sports, my newspaper editor and yearbook editor, Miss Richmeyer, actually, I still remember to this day, that kind of started instilling those early principles in me of what it meant to be a journalist and, how you went about going and doing things the right way. And that's when I first started doing it. Now, at the time, obviously, I graduated high school in like 96, so still the very early days of MMA. So certainly did not put the two passions together by any stretch of the imagination, but started to realize like, oh, this is a way I could still be around sports and the business of sports without actually being a player.
Right. From there, from high school, you and I are roughly the same age. You graduated in 96. I graduated in 97. Was it onto university for J school? Was it going through and pursuing this? Because we're in a spot right now where there's sort of this cross section of bunch of kids, bunch of people that have gone through, done some kind of post-secondary education, got all the tools, all the training. And then there's dudes like me that have a psychology degree tucked around this office somewhere and was just like, but I like writing. So what was your path from that point of, I think I want to do some of this sports writing stuff. Let me figure out how to get into it more.
A little bit of both, to be honest with you. So I wasn't fully committed to it, but I was like, some of my studies are going to be in this. And so I'm going to kind of give myself this option to better myself and give myself opportunities. But it was really still just kind of general studies and that sort of stuff, because I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I was putting myself through school by working in the restaurant business. And honestly, I'd like the restaurant business a lot too, man. And I saw opportunities to move up there. You know, I started at 16 years old as a bus boy, and then started hosting, and then started working in the kitchen, and started as a dishwasher, and then, you know, kind of made my way up there. And then, you know, once I turned 18 and I could serve alcohol, you know, then I was waiting tables, and you started seeing the kind of money you could make. And I was supporting myself at that point, and, you know, taking home that cash every single day. I was like, okay, hold on, industry isn't bad either. You know, like, I'm making money, like, there's stuff going on. So I was kind of torn between two worlds. And I was doing a little bit of both. And then, you know, when I got done with school, there was basically two offers on the table, and one was to go work for the Dallas Morning News for like $25,000. The other was to go into restaurant management for $50,000. And I was like, well, that's not a hard decision to make. Like, right. I'm going to go where this money is. I'm not that passionate about writing. Right. So I went into restaurant management, and just kind of gave away that hope or dream or thought for a long time. And that career worked well, man. I mean, by 24, I was a general manager. You know, so I was the youngest GM in the company. I was running a restaurant that had like 100 employees working for it. We were doing like, you know, $4 million a year in sales. So, I mean, I learned a lot about the business side of thing, and the fact that, you know, I'm managing a pretty profitable P&L, and learning how to manage people. You know, I'll never forget, you know, being 24 years old, and I got, you know, servers older than me that can't get to work on time. And I'm like, bro, I was out at the bar last night too. You know what I mean? Like, and I still got here on time. And so just learning to manage people and deal with all that was fun. And then got to a point around like 27, 28 years old where everything was going good. But I was like, hold on, man, like, this is good, but like, this isn't what really like the passion or what I wanted to do. It's what I ended up choosing to do because it was making me some money and I didn't hate it. But let me maybe give myself a chance to go back into it, because I just didn't want to look up at like 40 or 50 years old and be like, well, what if I'd have tried? You know, the way I looked at the time was like, I don't think restaurants as a concept are going anywhere. Like, I could probably
this will always be here. That's right.
Yeah.
I still tell my wife now. Yeah, I still tell my wife now. You and I very similar in some of these pursuits. And I still say now, like, if this goes sideways, I can always go back to bartending and waiting tables. Now, they're not necessarily going to hire a 45-year-old bearded Canadian man, but you can tell yourself that that's the case. It will still be there. There will be some place that I can go and, you know, serve some salmon or bring some burgers.
Hey, you can always go back and pursue that psychology business too, man. I mean, that's still going to be around as well.
That's true. That's true. So we get to 27, 28, making good money, but having that moment of like, all right, it's not really the passion. Restaurant will be here. From what I understand from having conversations with your former co-owner, colleague, longtime good friend, Dan Stupp, and others around the industry.
Yep.
You were just a dude that was, you know, out posting some stuff and wanted to write about this sport. And he was like, interested? Can you give me the like better version of that? Can you give me more of the detail of how John Morgan gets to what was first UFC junkie, then quickly was cease and desisted to MMA junkie?
You know, some say cease and desist, others friendly suggestion from an attorney, you know, however you want to phrase it. But no, it's funny. You're pretty spot on. Yeah, I just had that revelation that like, hey, man, I want to kind of get into this. And I was a daily reader of MMA Weekly. And in the forums, there was a post. It was Gorgeous George, who's obviously still with MMA Junkie to this day. And it was just like, hey, we're looking for somebody to help recap interviews from our radio show. It was Tag Radio at the time, Trigg and Gorgeous George, Frank Trigg and Gorgeous George. We're looking for somebody to recap our interviews for UFC Junkie. And at the time, I hadn't even heard of the website, but I was like, well, that's interesting. Like, okay, hold on. because I'm still in the restaurant business. I'm still working full time, but that's something I can do like when I get home. And I'm working a 12 or 13-hour shift as a restaurant manager, and then I come home and I listen to their interview and write up a little recap of the interview for posting on it. So I was like, yeah, that sounds cool, and it was kind of that. I'm like, look, you have no idea who I am, because I wasn't even like an active poster. I was more like a lurker, right? Like I just read things. And so I was like, look, you don't know who I am, and I can't even like give you like a resume because I've been in the restaurant business, but I have a passion for the sport. I think I'm decent at writing, and I have some background in that, and I'd love to do it. And they said, they talked to Dan Stupp, and Dan said, yeah, let's give this guy a shot. And it was free. I mean, it was intern work. Like I was just doing like one piece a day about whatever their interview was, and he would post it on the website, and that's how it got started. And then as the website started to grow, Dan was looking to bring somebody on part-time, and that's kind of how the whole thing started.
At what point, how far in were we before you were like, okay, we're going all in on this? Like, this is becoming the thing. I'm packing up from Dallas. I'm going to Vegas. This is going to be, now I'm chasing that passion. Now I'm following that passion.
So about after me doing that for, I don't know, maybe like 6 months or something like that of doing the intern work, the website was growing, and Dan was looking to bring somebody on part-time. And because we had that relationship already, the offer was there for me. And it was really wild, man, because, I grew up in Dallas, and, through the restaurant business, I started moving to other units of our restaurant, kind of like help them, make some changes and that. So I went from Texas to Oklahoma to Lexington, Kentucky to Dayton, Ohio. And so I was actually in Dayton, Ohio when all this was unfolding, which Dan, longtime Cincinnati resident. So it's kind of wild because, we started this kind of online relationship, so to speak. And then it was like, well, maybe we need to hire somebody. And, obviously these days it's a lot more common to maybe hire somebody that you haven't ever met in person because there's so much business online. But the fact that we were 45 minutes down the road from each other meant that we could actually get together, have a face-to-face conversation, and talk about stuff. So, I mean, it was really great the way that worked out. So about 6 months, he offered a part-time job. It wasn't full-time, but it was part-time. And so part of that was going to be working on the weekends. Well, I was the general manager of a restaurant, and our company policy was you had to be there on Friday and Saturday, the busiest days, if you were the general manager. So fortunately for me, my managing partner, my regional partner, is still one of my best friends to this date. And I kind of told him my plan, and I was like, hey, here's what I want to do. And he knew how much I love the sport and kind of what was happening. And so I was like, I've got an idea. How about you let me demote myself, promote my assistant general manager over me, so that guy can be in the restaurant on the weekends, and I'll still be around the rest of the week to make sure all the numbers are right, all the systems are in place. So it's like, I'm not really going to be the general manager, but I will be, and we'll just do that for structure. And fortunately, Mark, my buddy, was like, you know what, go for it. And so we did that. It was awesome that he allowed me that opportunity. And that was probably another 6 to 8 months of that structure before Dan was like, okay, we're ready to do full-time. Do you want to come on board full-time? And it wasn't near the money I was making as a general manager. Obviously, it was full time, but what those journalism salaries are. But I just knew I wanted to do it. I was like, I got to take a shot. Like I said, I know the restaurant business will be here. I'm going to leave this company on good terms, so if I need to come back, I can. And that was like 2008 at that point. And at the same time, my lease was ending in the apartment that I was on. I'm like, you know what? I moved here to Dayton, Ohio, for business,
for this gig.
Yeah, I don't need to stay in Dayton, Ohio. And I'm like, I can go. So where do I want to go? And I was like, well, I could go back home to Dallas. I'm like, or I could go to Vegas. I could go be in the heart of it. If I'm going to do this full time, why don't I just go to Las Vegas, be in the heart of it? And so moved out here in 2008 and, just kind of really put the chase in full gear.
Sort of been there ever since. I say sort of because you're home, like 2-3 days a week, maybe?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
For like
been in a lot of other
now.
places along as well.
Yeah, but that's the mailing address.
Fair point.
When you got out there and when you decided to make that move, did you set a timeline? Did you set like goals and meters for yourself of like, look, if this isn't being what I want it to be, if we're not moving forward, if I'm not having success, if the money ain't coming, then I got to go back and do this thing? Or was it just, we're going to ride this and see where it goes?
Yeah, I mean, as far as living in Vegas, I did put a 1-year time frame on that because I'd been to Vegas a couple times at that point. But as I tell a lot of people, and you've made the Vegas trip, man, it's after a couple days, you're like, dude, get me out of here, man. And I was the same guy. You go on the strip and you're like, oh, this is cool. Wow, that's beautiful. Check out that. That's amazing. And after a couple days, you're like, please, just get me back to my house. And I was the same way. So I gave myself a year to see even if I'd like living in Las Vegas. But once you get off the strip and you see what a cool town it is outside of it, then I was like, yeah. Right. So 1 year was the timeline there. As far as the career itself, no, it was just like, let's just ride this and see where it goes, man. Let's see how this progresses. And fortunately, it started progressing pretty quickly, man. Because you think about that era of 2008, man, that's when the everything schedule really off. That's it, man. The schedule really starts ramping up. Everything gets busy. That leads into a 2011 sale to Gannett and USA Today. So fortunately, I never really had to go back and readdress it of like, hey, is this working or not?
You mentioned the sale to Gannett. You were a part owner at some point along the way of MMA Junkie. We don't have to get into the financials and things like that, but what's it like being part of essentially a startup from pretty early days to having the people that run USA Today coming in and being like, hey guys, we'd like to give you this bushel of cash for this thing you created?
It's pretty wild, man. It's a pretty good feeling. It very much, makes you feel like, oh, we were doing something right. Like all the stuff that we were building along the way, we were moving in the right direction. Everything, to have a major media company like that believe in you and say that, man, you're doing such a good job that, we not only want to work with you, we want to acquire you and have you as part of our portfolio and brand. It was pretty cool, man. It was pretty gratifying to see. And I know, for the original owners, it was very nice. And see Dan, of course, stuck around and stayed on. The other two walked away, but it was pretty cool. You know what I mean? To see that, oh, okay, this thing that we built from nothing. I mean, those three guys started it, and I was the first guy they brought on. And to see that, now you're in a boardroom, signing legal paperwork with some decent financial terms of it, was pretty cool. It was pretty cool.
You were there for more or less 15 years, if I have the timeline right. Some different changes, some people in and out. Eventually Dan leaves, moves on to other things. But 15 years at a spot in this business, in any business really, but in this business, is rare. What's it like to have just stayed in one place and become such a foundational fixture piece that people go, MMA Junkie, that's John Morgan. I know what I'm going to get from that dude at this spot every single day.
Proud of it, man. Really, really proud of it, man. It was cool because you're right. It is a rarity. And it's not that I set out to do it that way, but I am kind of a loyal dude, and it was kind of cool to be a part of it. And truth be told, I never thought I'd be anywhere else, man. I wanted to be like 75, 80 years old, sitting there, cage side, and still repping MMA Junkie, and things just changed. That had to change. But it was cool to be a part. And again, just building something, to build something from a page that was getting a couple views a day to, a powerhouse, and to just be recognized and respected within the industry as a brand, and to know that we were a big part of doing that. It feels really nice about it, because you don't feel like just a part of a machine or whatever. You know what I mean? You feel like you really helped accomplish something. And, leaving was not the easiest thing to do and not the easiest decision to make, but it was actually my mom of all people. She's like, look, man, don't be sad. Don't be upset. Be proud of what you built. And I was like, you're so right, man. I'm so proud of what we built and what it became, and listen, what it still is.
We don't need to get into the details of leaving and all of that stuff, but the process of it. How long were you thinking about it? How'd it come about? As you said, a difficult thing. And I can only imagine, as somebody that is bounced around from place to place, been asked to leave a couple of spots, left on my own a couple of times. I know that even then it's challenging. Like, everything was severe. For instance, most recent spot, completely amicable, was just on a show with Sean last week. Still talk to those guys every day. But even that, after 6 months, is like, oh man, I'm not on severe anymore. 15 years in, all right, I'm no longer MMA Junkie at John at MMA Junkie John. What's it like?
It was hard. It was hard because it was a big part of who I was. It was a big part of my identity. And it was, kind of a several months long discussion, internally with myself and with my family as well. And I will say, man, when I ultimately made the decision, I think this is what I'm going to do. And it was scary, right? Because even when I left the restaurant business, right? Like, I was just starting a relationship with my wife. And I told her, I was like, look, I'm going to do this crazy thing. And I know we just kind of started, getting together. If you don't want to take this journey with me, like, I do not blame you one bit.
I get it 100% if you're getting out here.
Yeah. I was like, no hard feelings. Like, we can have that amicable split. We can stay friends. You know what I mean? And she's like, no, let's do it. Let's see what happens. And so when I was ready to make it, I always said though, but the thing is, at that time when I left the restaurant business, I didn't have a mortgage, I didn't have a kid,
Right.
and I've always said there's no way I could ever do that again. And I kind of ended up doing that again. And when I decided to leave, man, my wife, man, she was like, look, here's the thing. I know how hard you work, and I trust you, and I know you'll find a way to make this work. So if this is what's going to make you most happy, like, I support you. And that, having that support of a spouse like that, man, meant everything in the world. But it was several months long discussion, and like I said, we don't have to get into all the details. But bottom line is, things do change. When you sell to a company and you give up ownership of it, in the beginning, it is nice. It's like, hey, we love what you guys are doing.
Right.
We're gonna have you on because we want you. Just keep doing that, man, and it'll be awesome. And they did for about 10 years. And then the departure of Dan was a tough one, man. That was a real difficult one for me, and for multiple reasons. And then I got past that, and then it became some things that I was trying to do within my own career, including commentary with CFFC and chasing some of that passion, and that became a challenge, and it got to a point where I was looking at the company and saying, hold on, first of all, a lot of people that I loved aren't here anymore, so it's not really the same company. And second of all, it's like, I've given you, and granted, it was only like 12 years or 10 years with Gannett, but overall, like, I've given you 15 years of my life.
Yeah, but
like,
it's still 10 years and 12 years is still a lot.
Yeah.
Let's not go minimum. As we said, in this business,
it's
10 years, 12 years is a long ass time.
And it was like, man, I've given you this, and I've helped, and I think I've established our company. I think I've done a lot to help build it. And now I'm trying to do some things for myself, and you're not there to give back to me. Like, what are we doing here? And when I started to realize that, like, okay, I did everything to help support you, and you're not doing anything to help support me and some of these passions that I have. What are we doing here? You know what I mean? And so that's why I decided ultimately walk away. But to your original point, man, it's scary to be like, hold on, man. And listen, I spoke to some people in the industry that were like, bro, like, we don't really care where you work. Like, you're John Morgan, and we respect your effort and your voice and everything that you've put in, and we'll continue to do so. But it's hard to have that belief in yourself. You know what I mean? That like, oh, okay, hold on. So, I will still be able to do the same work, whether I'm doing it for this company or not. And then you realize you can. You realize you can.
Was the UG in place before you pulled the chute, or was it, we're going to go and then we'll find the next spot?
Yeah, it was in place. I'm not that crazy.
Okay.
It was.
You never know.
But I do have a mortgage, and I do have a kid, and so I was having some conversation with Keurig, and I knew what he was looking for, and I'm like, hey, I think this might be the move for me, and we had those conversations, and that's when I said, all right, let's do this.
We'll get to the UG, the landscape, and some different stuff of the industry itself a little later on. Before we get to some fun stuff, I mentioned off the top, John Morgan, press row, the blue polo. For the people that don't know, explain to them why you essentially wear a uniform on Saturdays.
I do. It's essentially a uniform. Yeah, it's funny, man. I never meant for it to become anything, and then eventually I embraced it to where now it's like an emoji on my Twitter account and that sort of thing. But it was as simple as my kid was like a year old, and I was at a USC event, and I just happened to be wearing a blue shirt. Like, it was just a blue shirt that I had. But as I was there during the middle of it, my wife sent me a text of my son at the TV, and I guess she had put it on pause and showed him he was touching the TV where I was. And I, obviously that, kid, man, it moved me. I'm like, right then I was like, I'm going to wear a blue shirt to every event. So when daddy's not home, when he's away, like if he's like, where's dad? You can turn the TV on, and my kid will be able to quickly find me cage side and see that blue shirt. So it's really just something for me and my son. And I never thought anybody would notice. And then now it's funny because I go back and I watch like highlights. I'm like, well, yeah, you're right there. It's immediate. So people started to notice, and then it just kind of started to embrace it and have a little fun. But yeah, ultimately it started just because my son was touching the TV, and I just happened to be a blue. If I'd been wearing a black shirt, maybe I'd be a black shirt guy. If I'd been wearing a red shirt, maybe I'd been a red shirt guy.
A decade later, is there any conversation with him where he's like, Dad, enough with the blue shirts?
No,
you can change it up. I know where you are. I know what you look like now. I can just pick you out on the line. Like,
maybe we should. Like, I thought about that. I'm like, like all these shows are at the Apex. Like, he doesn't have to find me. He just saw me like 2 hours ago, and he'll see me tonight. You know what I mean? Like, maybe I don't need to. But yeah, now it's just the uniform.
All right, so we'll get into some easier stuff, some non-fight stuff first. Obviously, coming up in the restaurant business, you mentioned working in the kitchen, doing the different gigs. Working in the kitchen means you got to know how to burn a little bit. So what are the go-tos that John Morgan makes for friends, for family? You're coming over to my place, you're bringing some frosty beverages, here you go.
We're grilling out, bro. We're doing some steaks. You know what I mean? If you're coming over, we're gonna get, we're gonna go down and get some prime ribeye. Season it nice and easy. You don't want to go over. You don't even have to marinate. Just a little salt and pepper, a little olive oil on there. We're doing some steaks, probably doing some potatoes. Maybe a little asparagus, something like that. But yeah, steaks, man. I love, being a Texas boy. I love good Texas barbecue. I've never really gotten into like the smoking for 20 hours type thing. I never did that side of it. But yeah, I love being in the kitchen. To be honest with you. My wife is starting to cook more these days, but I've always been kind of the primary food preparation guy.
Fair enough. You are someone that during my travels to Las Vegas, I have always leaned on of like, hey man, where do I need to go? What's the spot I got to get to? You were the man that hipped me to Ellis Island, which remains every time I turn up. I got to go at least once to get some cheap barbecue, real cheap beer, good food, great spot off the strip. What are some other spots that people need to check out for like day 2 when they're done being on the strip, as you mentioned? Because it is. If you haven't been to Vegas or if you've been to Vegas, after a couple of days, it's like, I need something different. So where are we heading? Where are we sending people?
I mean, it's incredible, right? Because there are so many phenomenal, like, high-end steakhouses and stuff like that on the strip. But once you get off, first of all, a family tradition, we go to Hot and Juicy Crawfish. I mean, if you want a little crawfish boil, some crab, they got a couple of those. That's actually a chain, but the original one here is really nice. I go downtown to Fremont Street and I hit up Pizza Rock down there. They got like all these different kind of all the different kind of pizzas you could possibly want in a really cool environment, So we're hitting up that. We're definitely go to Dino's for the dive bar. We're gonna hit up the like $2 PBRs, man. We're definitely get a little karaoke in there. We might not have to partake, but we're gonna enjoy that. We're gonna hit the dive bar. And get off. I love to go off the street. I love to get down to Fremont Street. I love taking people down to Fremont Street. If you're doing Vegas, you're gonna want to see the strip, but then you want to go see the real people, man. Then you want to go see is it a little sketchy? Yeah, it's a little sketchy, but I like a little bit of sketch.
A little bit of sketchy is important. Yeah, and like this, as you said, the strip is everybody that's come to town. Fremont Street and other places are everybody that lives here and knows. No disrespect to the places on the strip, the better places to go.
I'm telling you.
Just saying it. I'm not from there. I'm just saying. I'm saying it so you don't have to.
But you know.
So you mentioned $2 PBRs. You and I have shared some frosty beverages at time. I know that there are go-tos in terms of like, listen, we're having a bunch, so this is we're keeping it price smart. But if you are sitting down to have one beer, one nice cold frosty beverage, what's the pick?
I mean, if it's a frosty beverage and I'm only having one, I'm going to have the strongest one you got because I'll go light to dark, any flavor. So give me like a Belgian triple and like, something like that. I'm going to go for the biggest one you got, the highest content that you got. But yeah, again, I'll do a PBR. I'll do an IPA. I'll do a sour. To be honest, man, I'll do a little bit of anything, to be honest with you, when it comes to frosty beverages.
All right. Are we having a frosty beverage next week? Are you coming to Vancouver?
I will. So we shall.
Okay.
We absolutely shall.
We're going to get a frosty beverage. Started out in Dallas. What are the Dallas stops? What are the spots people got to check if they're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area?
Man, Dallas-Fort Worth is fun. I always say it's tough, as far as like there's, landmarks or historic things you need to see, there's not. But in terms of, I mean, obviously the JFK stuff, I mean, that's not exactly the most, fun day to have or whatever. So there's not a lot of that stuff. But as far as like just places to go hang out and restaurants, that's sort of like the barbecue, the Pecan Lodge downtown is amazing. The bar area on the lower Greenville area is a fun place to go with a little bit of sketch dialed in there as well. Steakhouses there, Mexican food. I mean, it's solid. Dallas is a good food spot for sure.
This career has taken you to every continent save for 2, if I'm correct. No Africa, no Antarctica yet, though I know if you get to Africa, you are then going to get to Antarctica.
That is true.
My prep.
That is true.
What are the favorite locales, the favorite spots you've been to, the coolest stopovers, whatever it is along all of these journeys? I can't imagine how many air miles you have piled up.
Yeah, we're in the 2 million air mile range, so we've gotten a lot of them over the years. Australia is always fun just because the people are so cool, man. Obviously a journey to get down there, but the people are awesome. And as far as UFC is discussed, I mean, they're hammered at like 9:30 in the morning on a Sunday to watch it. Like, and I can respect that. Like when you're hammered at 9:30 a.m., like I respect the commitment to that. So that's always fun. New Zealand was amazing. You talk about layovers. I had a layover in Fiji one time on the way. I was like, I had an 8-hour layover. I was like, I will take this connection every single time. So that was amazing. I think one of my favorites is that I always refer back to is Moscow. Like being there in Red Square, I always thought was super cool. Like growing up, as you said, we're kind of the same age, and just the Cold War and all that. It didn't feel like you were, as an American, were supposed to be in Red Square. You know what I mean? Right. So walking around at night there is cool. Obviously, Europe is amazing just because there's so many different cultures in a small space. You can go from one place quickly to another. Brazil 29 times, and I love Rio de Janeiro, man. Sitting on the beach there, plastic chair, dollar beers, breeze coming in over the ocean. I mean, that's a cool spot to be. So fortunate. Hopefully I get to knock off Africa and Antarctica at some point.
Given all of these travels, I would imagine there are like travel must-haves. So what are the go-to travel essentials for John Morgan?
I'm pretty easy, to be honest with you. The main travel essential is that you do not have a bag to check. If you are a veteran traveler, you are only carrying on travel. Okay, you do not want to check a bag. It slows you down once you get to the airport. It gives you an opportunity to get lost. If you need to take a standby flight, you can't necessarily do it because you can't get on. So first of all, you got to make sure that everything you're having is packed up inside that carry-on baggage. Now, my gear pack over the years has expanded dramatically in terms of like audio equipment and headphones and all the other stuff, so that gets a little bit complicated. But overall, I'm easy, man. I'm just bringing I got some Bose Quiet Comfort headphones so I can kind of drift off into my own world. I can sleep on a plane, which is great, man. A lot of people I know can't sleep on a plane. I don't know what my life would be if I couldn't sleep on a plane. That's where I get caught up. So I'm pretty easy. I'm not a big reader on a plane or anything like that. I'm more like get a pre-fight frosty beverage and fall asleep.
That sounds pretty good. I wish I could just zonk right out. I'm one of those. I'm gonna need to try. Henner Gracie's got the new like sleep contraption coming out. Henner always with the inventions. It's the
crazy.
Upgrade for everything. Might have to try it out. Keep you upright, get you sleeping. Good times. We'll re-rack this, get moving into the back half of it. It's a conversation with John Morgan of the Underground East, Spencer Kite, here on Keyboard Kimura. You are now at the UG. It is, as you said in previous interviews, pretty solid URL to have. Mixedmartialarts.com.
Not bad.
It's been just about a year now. What's the first year been like?
It's been good. It's been a reminder of what it's like to be a small company again. It's kind of what we did in the beginning with MMA Junkie, where it's like we got to a point where we were like, hey, are we going to continue to do this on our own, or are we going to partner with somebody? And that's what kind of led to the Celica Net, because you need some IT assistance, you need some ad sales assistance, you need all those things. So, it's been a reminder of what those days were like, and it all feels very, very familiar in those ways. But the freedom of it has been amazing. I work most closely with Kirik, and obviously, a pioneer in the industry in his own right, of course, and his support and his blessing to go do anything I want in terms of chasing the commentary opportunities and doing those things has been tremendous. So the tech has been a little bit slower than I'd like to develop along the way, but that's the headaches and the hassles that come along with it. We're making those baby steps and moving in the right direction. So I'm happy where we've gotten. I wish we could have done it a lot faster, and I wish we could get to where we want to go a lot faster, but these are the growing pains and the patience that it takes. So I'm looking forward to what, the next year plus will bring.
You mentioned where you want to go. What are, not to give it all away, not to tell everybody like, here's the 5-year plan, but what are the steps? It is still, as if I know correctly, an operation of you and like 2 other people with you. And that's about it, which I would assume, as much as I know you like working and the hustle is real, you probably like to bring 1 or 2 people on to help you out a little bit.
Definitely. And just setting up that infrastructure, even, like there's been so many people along the way that they're like want to volunteer to like, I'd love to intern, like I'd love to work and I'd love to give you that support. And honestly, man, I'd love to do that because I love to kind of like help educate and share just my history. Not that I sit here and say, well, I know everything and let me impart it on you, but I can save you some time and some of the headaches and the hassle because I've been through them all, and I can tell you what my experience is and questions you may have and how to do that. So I'd love to do that. But my biggest thing is having the infrastructure in place that those people that we, do something like that with aren't just getting used, basically, you know what I mean? That I'm giving back to somebody in a meaningful way. So that is something I'd like to do, is to have some people on at least a part-time role. And like I said, use it as an intern possibility and some things like that. So yeah, there is a general direction. I mean, obviously there's some cool things. The forum is, man, it's amazing, but getting everything just kind of modernized and getting everything, up to date. It's a legacy site, but it didn't necessarily have like all the iterations along the way where it was updated and things were brought up to a technically current space. And so that's what we're really trying to do, is bring things up to a technologically current space, but doing so in a financially responsible way. I told Kirik that from the beginning. I was like, look, I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. Let me give you a little bit of the general direction of how we get here. And I think we can do it. You can pour money on it, but I just hate to do that, man. You know what the margins are like in this industry. And so it's like, I don't want you to be like dramatically out of pocket to do that. So let's do this financially responsible, which means a little bit of a slower, meandering way, but it's also an industry that I don't, I'm not trying to just come in and turn flames and dump it and move on to something else. Like, this is what I want to keep doing. So we have the ability to be patient.
Right. The landscape of MMA media has certainly shifted in the 15 years you and I have been in here. What have been, to your opinion, the biggest positive changes, and then maybe the most detrimental negative shifts over the years?
I think the positive is really like how forward and technologically savvy the people in this industry are, man. I think part of it maybe because, the sport did kind of live on the internet. So I feel like the people that are involved in it, and maybe it's just the demographics in terms of the age group and that sort of thing. But man, I feel like this industry has always been kind of pushing the envelope, the media people, and what they can do. And yeah, I mean, as I always like to joke, when I got into this, I'm like, I want to be a sports writer. It's like now, like, I don't write like that. You know what I mean? Like, you're doing this. You know what I mean? Like, I remember, Dan and I at MMA Junkie were kind of hesitant to get into the video side because we wanted to do it right, number one. But we were like, I don't know. That's not really our core strength. And we want to get somebody that knows what they're doing. And now the majority of my day is spent video editing and audio editing and doing those things. So, but I think it's cool. So I do think that's a positive, in seeing that everybody's kind of evolving with it. I mean, I got my man Kevin Ioli doing IG lives and stuff. I mean, that speaks volumes of embracing technologically savvy. That's good. I guess the negative I'd say is, and I guess it's just natural, man, is I just feel like so much of media these days is just, first of all, centered completely around trash talk and completely around, which is fun. We all like rivalries. We all like feuds. You know what I mean? But so much of it is also just like, what did so-and-so post on Twitter today? What did so-and-so post on Instagram? It's like, first of all, are you even 100% sure that person posted that and not their social media guy? You know what I mean? Because if so, we're giving a quote that isn't even really a quote from a guy. Like, I guess it's on his account, so he's responsible for it.
He or she has to own it, but
gotta own it at that point. But it's like, do you really? So I miss, and I get it, man. It is the way things move. Like, I have an 11-year-old son, and I see it, man. Like, the attention span of kids is nothing. Like, the TikTok generation, it's a real thing. But I just feel like there's so much less storytelling than there used to be, and I wish there was more of that. And it's one thing that I've always appreciated about you, because I think you continue to do a good job of it. But I also know what a challenge that can be, and how time consuming it is, and how maybe underappreciated it is. I mean, obviously I have to worry about it less these days, but with like MMA Junkie, I mean, we had corporate bosses that we had to answer to in terms of page views and that sort of thing. And so it was like, well, I can tell this really compelling story about this undercard fighter that I think people are really going to be blown away by, or I can post a picture of what Conor McGregor had for breakfast today and which one's going to get the page views. And so you kind of had to, I always said you kind of had to do the things that you had to do so that you could then in turn do the things you want to do. But there's only so much time in the day, right? It's a tough balance. So I do kind of hate that shift of media, but I don't think it's just MMA media in general. I think it's just kind of the direction of media overall.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that last part. And for me, like, you're spot on. Like, the most fulfilling things I've done have probably gotten the least page views.
It's crazy.
And like, I've been fortunate. I don't have haven't had in many spots anybody that's like, look, man, we just got to go page views. I ran a blog at a newspaper website for 9 years, and at no point did the editors come to me and be like, hey, we need more GSP stories. We need more Conor McGregor stories, because those really drive traffic. There were always some. You always get them out there when they're in the when they're in the space, when they're in the eye. But I was always fortunate to go the just do what you want to do. But I agree, it's a weird spot.
It's frustrating, right? Because I mean, anybody that's doing this properly will tell you like the way that you should be doing things is you should go in and you should go into Google Trends and you could see what's clicking the best and you should write a story based around that because that's what's going to get you in the algorithm. I'm just like, that's not to me what it should be. Like what is most newsworthy or what is most not what's most trendworthy or what's most likely to get us in the algorithm. And it sucks because it is a business. And so I get it. Like I'm not hating on anybody that does it that way. That's how you generate money, but that's not why I wanted to do it. And that's not what I'm passionate about doing.
Well, and so for me, this feels like a good opportunity to have this discussion with someone else in the space that's working at a large site. Cause I'm usually on here on the podcast, jumping on my soapbox and screaming and yelling about things. And then I generally don't put them out because I don't want to just sound like an angry bastard all the time. But it feels to me like it's just this self-perpetuating cycle, right? We get into the situation where so much of the criticism is, well, we don't know these people. We're not introduced to more of these people. We only hear about them once they reach a certain point. And my argument is always, well, you're going to the wrong sources or you're not looking hard enough, whether it's UFC.com, you guys at the UG have a business relationship with UFC.com. You guys put our stuff out. Appreciate that. Although I'm a jerk about it sometimes. I get like this. I at least own that I'm an asshole half of the time. But it just feels like all the criticisms or some of the criticisms are things that can be defeated if we shift a little bit of our perception and the way we're doing things. Like, no disrespect to any site that is doing the stuff you mentioned or putting out the photographs of so-and-so throughout the years. Get that traffic. I understand business overlords dictate certain things, but it also means you're contributing to all of these athletes that you and others are saying are unknown, being unknown. Am I off base? Am I on point?
Nope.
Somewhere in between?
You're absolutely on point. You know what I mean? And it's just such a tough balance to stretch, to reach, because you're absolutely right. I mean, there are, you look at like the major publications. I mean, the salaries that they have on hand and the operational costs that they have on hand are significant, and nobody's in business to make money. And so, if media was this perfect thing where it didn't have profits at the center of it, like we could do it a lot different, but it does. It's a business like anything else. And so you got to drive those page views, and so you can't fault anybody for those strategies. It's just, I wish there was that balance, because I think it goes so over that, where it's like, you have these quarterly meetings with the corporate overlords, and I don't see a whole lot. And listen, to Gannett's credit, I will say they did a lot of like trying to highlight beautiful stories, trying to highlight meaningful impacts in journalism. But at the end of the day, your most direct bosses are looking at, hey man, you know what our page views were last year? You know what they are this year? You know what the click-through rate is? Why are we this way? Why, do you know what the budget was for what we were supposed to be at? It's frustrating, right? So you get it, but you're 100% right. I got to a point, especially when I'm not doing as much writing anymore, but when I was doing more, like, I got to a point where it's like, no offense, but like, how many GSP stories have I written? You know what I mean? How many Anderson Silva stories have I written? Then there's so many amazing stories. Like, here's this guy that just made his way in. How about it was one that was interesting, not recently, the Themba Garimbo story, where he's like tweets out his bank account that he had $7 left. And then that opens a whole nother can of worms where people are like, that's not a beautiful story. That's a horrible story. He's a professional athlete. He should be rich. And I see the beauty in it, where it's like, man, like, think about what he risked and think about what he was willing to do and to come to this. I just talked to Dan Ige earlier today, and he was so open and honest about the mental challenges of the losing streak that he was on, and how difficult it was to just keep going and to keep believing in yourself when all the criticism is out there. So you're absolutely right, man. I think there's so many more amazing stories. I remember early on with Dan Stupp, we were kind of talking about the vision of the site and where we go. And I was like, look, man, I want to get to a point where if there's a 12-fight card, we have 24 pre-fight interviews, because we talk to every single person on the card. And because I believe that each one of these people has an interesting story. Like, this is not an easy life. This is not a normal job. Like, everybody's got something, and the commitment that it takes to be here is unbelievable. And that's where I want to be. And, we did our best. And then, then Conor McGregor has something for breakfast that you gotta post.
Is there a way, in your estimation, like you're at the fore of a new site again, or a new place for you in terms of
Right.
work, where you're laying that track of what we're going to do? Is there a way to find that balance? Is there a way to kind of cover both ends of things?
I hope so. I do. I mean, fortunately, I'm in a place now where, again, we are a business and we're not trying to lose money, but we don't have a massive overhead that we've got to take care of, and that, so we've got to worry about that on a daily basis. So I think you can. Number one, it just involves the people that are telling the stories to be passionate about wanting to tell those stories, because you're not going to get the reward necessarily of this is the most high profile piece I've ever written. But when you can be proud of the work that you put in, and when you can help tell a story, and help shine a light, look, one of my favorite things to do now is commentary, not only because I just enjoy putting on a headset and talking about fights, but I enjoy, meeting these athletes that are in their amateur career, that are just starting out. Like it is so fun to me. Timothy Kwamba is a guy that's going to fight on Dana White's Contender Series. I was just talking to Dewey Cooper about him earlier. I called his fights as an amateur in Tough Enough. I called a couple of his fights in CFFC as a pro, and now I'm going to get to see him at the Apex fighting for a contract to try to get into the UFC. Like, I love getting to see people chase that passion and have those ways up. So I think a big part of finding that balance is having people that are passionate enough to want to do it and to understand, that there is a balance they need for it. The other thing too is I hope that the media moving forward, as it continues to grow and get big in the MMA space, can embrace regionalization a little bit more. You know what I mean? And being, because if everybody's just trying to cover the main event of the UFC, like we're all telling the same story, like everybody's writing the same piece. But if it's like, I want to be the preeminent Brazilian media source, or I want to be the preeminent, South America as a whole, and just regionalizing like that, I'm anxious to see if there's more of that. I'm anxious to see how this works with the PFL. They're talking about bringing out all these regional leagues. They've already done it with Europe and, prime time in these different markets. I'm anxious to see how that works. So, I hope that'll help, because again, I believe that the sport, man, to do this takes incredible sacrifice and incredibly unique individuals. And I hope more of their stories can get told.
I agree 100%. And it's funny. I very recently talked about like that sort of segmentation of like, if everybody's trying to do everything, we all just end up covering the same 6, 8, 5, 10 people and
Yep.
10 shows. And we're saying the same, and no knock on the athletes either, but like Fight Week, they're telling us all the same stuff. We're not coming with, unless you're getting something that's, you get a moment with somebody where they're just like, I'm honest, or I'm raw, or you have that one question. We're all getting the same quotes. They're all the same thing.
Listen, I know you've been in the room when athletes are doing the phone rounds, and it is incredible because you're only hearing one side of the conversation, but you're like, this dude is literally doing the same interview 10 times in a row, like the exact same thing. And you're right. The responses it's not that they're canned responses. It's just like, that's the answer to the question. You're asking the same thing. It's just so you hear the same thing over and over.
We've had a lot of talk recently, and as some stuff has happened within the space, about access journalism, which is always a thing that makes me sort of like bristle a little bit. It's one of the things that I recorded an angry podcast about and then threw it in the bin because it sounded like an angry asshole. But my stance on it, or my position on it, has always been like, access is required. It's a thing that happens in every sport. It happens really in every form of journalism. Like the people that are White House correspondents have access. It is a integral piece of this. Now, I understand the criticism of you've got to maintain lines, but as somebody that has a great deal of access and has for a number of years, how do you strike that balance between, I got to do the things that I got to do, I've got to ask the questions that need to be asked, but I'm going to be here again in 2 weeks, and if they decide that I'm not ever getting a microphone or no one's ever speaking to me again, that kills my career, not just my opportunity this week. So how do you find that and navigate that balance?
Yeah, man, it's such an interesting topic because like some of the things that I think people forget is like, what does help is that, there's people that are doing some stuff that maybe the UFC or maybe Dana White doesn't like, and they're like, well, we couldn't get a comment. Well, I can get a comment. So I could actually get, you're right. Maybe I've had
it's kind of helpful.
Yeah, you're like, maybe I've had to strike a balance, but guess what? All those, answers that you didn't like, that you said were terrible answers, somebody had to ask the question. If you can't even get in the door, there is some value to having that access and at least having the conversation. And one of the things that I've always stressed to people is that, especially working, because let's be honest, in the end of the day, we're talking about the UFC and Dana White. Like, nobody's talking about, man, that's Scott Coker. He just throws people out of Bellator. Like, that's what we're talking about. And I can tell you that, both UFC PR teams, both Dana White, I mean, to a man, to a woman, they've never said, do not ask about this, don't ask about that, don't do this, whatever. Now, do I believe that there's a time and a place for everything? I absolutely believe there's a time and a place for everything. Not only just because that person is going to appreciate it, but they're going to give you better answers. If you want to talk about a complex topic or a potentially controversial topic, doing it at a press conference when Dana can barely hear you anyway because he's half deaf, and I'm not knocking on him, and he's admitted that, he just, it's not going to get the best, and then you're going to have the crowd booing, and it's going to be, and listen, it's not the best time or place to get, getting a meeting or getting a phone call or getting a private scrum is a better place to do that. So I think that's one of the big things. I know that, during my time with Gannett, obviously we had an advertising relationship with the UFC, but, and I know there was a famous tweet that Dana sent out years and years ago that gets referenced many a time. They never told us anything about what we were supposed to write and what we weren't. I mean, Dan Stupp, man, he's not that guy. He is
not that guy.
You go try and talk to Dan Stupp about, hey, well, the UFC suggests that they'd appreciate for you to write about this. It never happened. It just never happened. And I don't know how to be any more clear and transparent about that. So a lot of the things that are out there, unfortunately, I just think aren't true. There's assumptions that are made. There's things that are said. Like, for instance, look, fighter pay is a big discussion, right? Why don't you ask more about fighter pay? Do you know how many times in my 15 years I've asked about fighter pay and had conversations? Like, should I just keep asking the same question over and over because I'm going to get the same answer I've always had? No. So, I think there's unfortunately, some misinformation out there and some assumptions. Do I believe that, there are certain people that do a much better job of investigative and forceful type work? Absolutely, they do. But listen, I think we all play different roles. I think you said a spot as well. It's like, not everybody can do the same job. There's so much of this job that needs to be done. And not all of us are, necessarily going to handle it that way. But I think sometimes there's a little bit of an overarching misinformation about what can and can't be done within the framework of the UFC.
Yeah, there's certainly space for everybody. There's lanes that can be followed and paths that people can go down that creates opportunity where you don't need that access, where you don't need to talk to anybody with the promotions, any of the athletes. Absolutely. For people like you and I, we need to have that access. Again, mortgages, amongst other things.
I've always wanted to create content around the fighters themselves. You know what I mean? More so than the business. To be honest, if I'm just being honest with you, the business side of I don't care how many pay-per-views the UFC does. Don't care. Not my business. Not my job. I don't care. What are the television ratings telling you about? I don't care. I don't care. What I care about is the athletes in the sport, and I love being a part of helping to tell their stories and helping to document their lives. I always look. To me, it's kind of wild, but each fight week, man, that's a chapter in somebody's life, man. You know what I mean? The one that they're always going to remember, and I enjoy getting a part of being a help of documenting that.
Not that I didn't know this about you before, but this is heartening for me. I literally 10 things went out today. We are taping this on Thursday, June 1st. 10 things for UFC Vegas 74 went out today. Item number 1 is that I like Spencer cards, which are cards like this weekend's card. So when you're watching this, folks at home, it will be last weekend's card where we have ranked fighters in the main event and a couple more throughout the card, but just a bunch of fights. Because I said that exact same thing you just said. This is a huge moment for so many of these athletes, and I'm going to respect that, honor that, appreciate that. And like you, I don't want to get bogged down in the business and the same arguments and the same fights and the same things that so many people are worried about. I like watching fights. I started paying attention to this because I liked watching fights and was like, bet you I could write about this stuff. I'd like to talk to some of these folks. And guess what? Now someone pays me to sit and watch fights on Saturday.
It's amazing.
Why
right?
do I want to be angry? Why do I want to invest my time and well-being into things that are going to make me angry? And they make me angry. I'm with everybody. Fighter pay sucks. It needs to be more. Do I want to spend all of my days being angry No, I want to
Absolutely
enjoy
not.
some stuff and tell some cool stories and have the odd fighter reach out and be like, hey, thank you. Because those are the things that mean something to me far more than the Twitter masses being like, hey, you asked the right question.
I agree. I agree. It's so funny.
It's
The one right now is like the criticism of the Ultimate Fighter. And listen, like I hate to be like Dana, but it's so true, right? Like, don't watch it. You don't have to watch it if you don't want to. I'm still gonna watch it. Like I still like it. Could they do some things different? Maybe. I like the way they did the tournament format this year with the seeding and how it came out. That was intriguing to me. I love the tension that is obviously going to be there between Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler. I'm still watching on Wednesday night. It's it's just what I like to do. I don't get it, man. You don't have to watch it. You know, your criticism
I
is
always
hard
get
quality.
hit with the, of course you feel this way because you work for the UFC and whatever. And yes, I earn money by recapping the Ultimate Fighter. But I tell you what, all of those things you just said still apply to me because I watch that show and I'm just like, I'm in. I don't care about the drama in the house. I want to see some people fight. And to me, it goes back to that introduction. And I know you've talked about this a ton, and we'll wrap up here shortly, of like, these are the first moments we're seeing a lot of these athletes this season, not necessarily because we got a bunch of people that are from the former UFC athletes back in the show. But like, I got to see Brady Heastand before a lot of people saw him make the walk for the first time. And I learned in season 29 that this kid's got some grit. He's got some sandpaper to him. And if you build some skill down the road, he might be something. And then he got in the octagon and showed me that grit and sandpaper by coming back and winning a couple of fights. I still like this stuff. Those things still matter to me. They're still important.
I love, calling amateur fights for Tough Enough and seeing people that aren't even professionals yet and being like, whoa, that's going to be amazing. And now, we're seeing guys that are, teenagers that are already look like professional high level fighters because they've been training since they were like 8 years old and they're already polished up and ready to go. And I love working for CFFC and I do it because I love it, man. I'm passionate about it. And so I get it, man. Like, I understand the criticism. Oh, there's too many cards. There's too much to keep up. I get it. Like, I don't know any baseball fan that watches every single baseball game the whole year long, right? Like, you don't have to. You don't have to watch the whole card. You don't have to watch every card. You just have to I think that's what happened. What has happened is that it was like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where there were only like 8 cards a year. And yeah, like, we knew top to bottom every single fighter on the card, every single fight. They all had implications moving forward. It's not that way anymore. Some things are just going to be a regular season Tuesday game. You know what I mean? It's not going to be the same way. And I think people have to change their understanding of it, or they do reach these frustrations and they do reach the point where they're like, I can't do it anymore. I think if you change your understanding of it a little bit, it changes your output.
You've mentioned calling fights a couple of times, obviously something that you do, CFFC, Fight League Atlantic, Tough Enough. When did you start? What made you want to put that headset on and explore that avenue? Because my brother grew up, went through broadcast journalism school. It is a tough gig. It's not as easy as it looks, ladies and gentlemen, to get out there and be calling action live. What made you want to do it? Who are the people that sort of served as the guides for you as you got going down that path?
Yeah, it was honestly first started happening when I came out here to Las Vegas, and Tough Enough, the guys out there asked me if I'd want to be a part of it, and small, amateur events, of course. I mean, the premier amateur organization in the nation. I mean, got to call some Ronda Rousey fights before she went pro. Got to call Ryan Couture, Alan Chauvin. I mean, some names along the way, but just really started doing it with them, and right away I was like, oh, I like this because. Number one, you're right. It is talking about the action, and this is my favorite sport, and I enjoy talking about the action. But I also realized it was just another means to help tell a story and to help tell about these athletes. And I think, to me, that's what makes this sport so intriguing, right? The sport itself, like any two people, the whole it's in our DNA, and, if there's a fight, on every corner, we're turning into that one. It is true. But it's even more exciting if you're like, did you know that guy just quit his full-time job and is chasing this? And did you know that guy right there lost his last 3 fights? And man, he's kind of not sure if he's going to keep chasing. It just adds that little bit to it. When I realized, you can kind of help the audience understand not only what's happening on their screen, but also the stakes of what it is. Because when there's a UFC title fight on the line, we understand what the stakes are. There's that big shiny belt, but you might not understand it when it's, some of these other organizations or these other levels of fight. So I really started to enjoy that. Did it for several years, and then Had some folks over at Gannett who suggested, that I not do that in it for a while. Those people left the company, and so I started getting to do it again. And once I did it a second time, and kind of started that second stint, I was like, I'm gonna do this. Like, I enjoyed it so much, and I gave it up because I didn't want to rock the boat, and I was loyal to MMA Junkie. But with Dan gone and with some other changes that have been made, even the corporate staff at Gannett had already moved on. Once I started doing it again, I was like, I want to go all in this. I gave it up one time, and I don't want to give it up again. I really enjoy doing this.
What is the toughest part of being on the headset and calling live fights?
Not knowing when CM Punk's gonna bust your balls. No, it's listen, man, I think, making sure that you're staying focused, number one, because it is easy to drift sometimes and let your thought go elsewhere, especially, some people, you'll see some people, they're tweeting in between fights when they're on broadcast, they're sending some text. I feel like that takes me out of the moment. So I try to just tuck that phone away and not get distracted, even during like the commercial breaks or whatever, making sure you're staying focused and being in the moment. That to me is, I guess, a challenge, because it can be kind of long. Boy, our shows aren't as long as the UFC shows, man. When you talk about those 6.5, 7.5 hours on mic, and then, add in Anik, doing like a pre-show and a post-show and whatever else, man, it's crazy how long it's a longer day than you think it can be. But I love it, man. Honestly, it's my favorite. I always say there's no place I'd rather be than cage side at a UFC event on Saturday night. But the only time that changes when I got a headset on and, I'm at CFFC or Fight League Atlantic or Tough Enough, and I get to talk about the fights, man. I absolutely love it.
Most memorable moment you've been a part of on a broadcast?
I mean, there's been some amazing highlights, but it's got to be the missing finger with Kite Pliev. I mean, that was like to hear the words come out, like I hear them in my head before I say them, and to hear the words come out of my mouth that like his finger is gone. I mean, it was such a bizarre scene. I'm like, I can't believe, what am I watching unfold? That is one I'll never forget, man. Just to try in real time, because you're not hearing everything, right? Because you've got the headset on, so you're not necessarily getting everything that's happening in there. Funny side story is Punk, obviously being the guy that he is hilarious. He's like, they're asking over the loudspeaker for anybody to look for the finger. That's not true, but he was just having a little fun, Right. But right. I saw like in news reports about the event that like the MC was directing people to look for the finger. They use it as fact, and I was like, well, let's a little kayfabe here. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's do it.
throw a little wrestling carny in there just for fun. Before I let you get out of here, let everybody know what's coming up, where they can follow you, how they can follow the UG and everything you're doing.
Yeah, follow all the UG accounts. And for me personally, John Morgan _MMA on Twitter, John Morgan MMA on Instagram. I'll try, not the best social media guy ever, but I try to keep you up to date with what I'm going. But we got a packed schedule, man. We got a lot coming on, man. I look forward to seeing you in Vancouver. And then, CFFC schedule's getting nuts. Fight League Atlantic's got a couple shows. So we'll be bouncing around. We'll keep you up to date. There's a lot. I can't even keep my calendar straight these days. It's getting loaded up, but I cannot wait for the back half this year. We have some pretty cool stuff happening.
You'll be piling up the air miles. You'll be piling up the work. I'm looking forward to next week. Getting back on the road. It's not really the road, but back on the road, getting back boots on the ground at an event. I look forward to seeing you and having that frosty beverage. We'll probably keep it lighter than the craziest treble. I got to drive home every night. I'm not staying in the city. I'm just driving home. It's 45 minutes. I got to come back, hang out with my wife and my dog, but I'm looking forward to it. Absolutely, my man.
We'll keep it light and easy. I look forward to it, brother.
I appreciate you coming on. For John, I am Spencer. This has been a conversation with. We'll see you next week.